Look at your hand right now, whatever shade it is, light, dark, somewhere in between. 70,000 years ago, nobody looked like that. Not a single person on Earth. Every human alive had the same skin color, and it wasn't the color you're picturing. Be honest, when you picture early humans, what do you see? Because whatever you just imagined, the science says you're probably wrong, and the real answer is a lot stranger than anyone expected. Skin color is the thing humans have fought wars over, built empires around, written laws about. It also happens to be the youngest visible feature on your body, younger than your eye color, younger than your height, younger than the shape of your nose. We spent a very long time arguing about something that barely finished forming. So what were we all? Originally, the answer starts about 1.2 million years ago. Before that, our ancestors most likely had patchy, lighter skin under their fur, similar to chimpanzees today. Then something happened. Our ancestors lost most of their body hair. Exposed skin means exposed to the sun, and the sun kills. Not dramatically, not instantly. It destroys folate. Folate is a B vitamin your body needs to copy DNA, to build red blood cells, and to carry a pregnancy to term. Without enough folate, a fetus dies, or is born with defects that prevent it from surviving to reproduce. This matters because evolution doesn't care about you. It cares about your children. If you don't reproduce, your genes end. That's the game. So 1.2 million years ago, under intense African sun, dark skin wasn't a choice. It was the price of survival. The gene behind it, MC1R, locked into place across the entire species. Everyone. Dark. 100%. For over 1 million years, that was the only version of human skin that existed. Think about that for a second. Every person, one color, for 1 million years. And then humans started moving. Roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, populations began leaving Africa. They headed north, into Europe, into Central Asia. And here's where it gets complicated. Because the further north you go, the less UV you get. Which sounds like good news if you're worried about folate. But it's not, because now the problem flips. You need UV to make vitamin D. Vitamin D is what allows your body to absorb calcium. Without vitamin D, your bones soften. Your immune system crashes. Rickets. Infections. Children born with severe vitamin D deficiency often didn't survive long enough to have children of their own. There it is again. Reproduction. The only thing evolution tracks. So in northern latitudes, dark skin became a liability. It was blocking the one UV signal the body desperately needed to catch. And this is where the story stops being gradual, because what the genetic evidence shows is this didn't happen slowly. It happened in bursts, independent, at least 3 times, in completely separate populations. Europe, the gene SLC24A5, East Asia, KITLG and OCA2, and even the Neanderthals, a completely separate species, independently evolved a variant of MC1R. 3 separate species, 3 separate mutations. Same result. When evolution solves the same problem 3 times independently, it's telling you something. It's telling you the alternative was lethal. Not uncomfortable, not suboptimal, lethal. Think about your sunscreen this morning. SPF 50. You barely thought about it. That jar is you. 1.2 million years into a war with the sun that you're still fighting. Now, here's the detail that genuinely broke the internet in 2018. 1903, a farmer in Cheddar, Somerset, England, finds a skeleton. It's 10,000 years old. They called him Cheddar Man. For over a century, he was depicted in textbooks with pale skin because he was British. Obviously, he was pale, right? In 2018, UCL and the Natural History Museum extracted DNA from his inner ear bone. Cheddar Man had dark skin and blue eyes. Dark skin, blue eyes. 10,000 years ago, in England. Sound familiar? It should. That's not some remote ancestor from a faraway land. That's the person who first stood where London now stands. And for 115 years, everyone in a textbook drew him wrong. That should make every person pause, because it tells you something critical about how recent this change actually is. The gene SLC24A5, the main gene behind lighter skin in European populations, only became widespread 6,000 to 12,000 years ago. Let me put that in context. Cleopatra lived roughly 2,000 years ago. The pyramids were built around 4,500 years ago. When most of the pyramids were under construction, most Europeans still had dark skin. Let that sit with you for a second. That is not ancient history, not by any real definition. Now here's the thing that makes this even stranger. The shift wasn't just genetic, it was dietary. For 95% of human history, we were hunter-gatherers. Our vitamin D came from a combination of sunlight and animal fat, fatty fish, liver, bone marrow, eggs. These were genuine vitamin D bombs. Then, around 10,000 years ago, agriculture happened. People started eating wheat, barley, millet, which are essentially vitamin D deserts. Their food-based vitamin D crashed. At exactly the same moment, they were also moving further from the equator. Less sun, less animal fat, more grain. 3 factors hitting simultaneously. That's the actual villain of this story. Not UV, not latitude, not any single thing. The convergence, and the body's response was extreme, because it had to be. When we say selection pressure was intense, here's what that means in practice. In a given population, the individuals with slightly lighter skin survived longer, had more children. Their children inherited the gene, had slightly lighter skin still. Over generations, the frequency of the gene shifted, not because anyone decided anything, because the other option killed you. And here's your gut check on how fast this happened. 6,000 years. In evolutionary terms, that is nothing. 6,000 years. If evolution were a year, this happened in the last 23 hours. That's emergency speed. The body didn't have time to be elegant about it. Now, there is one thing the conventional story always gets wrong. The idea that dark-skinned populations simply didn't move north, or that lighter skin was a European innovation. Wrong on both counts. Indigenous peoples of northern regions like Inuit communities maintained darker skins despite extreme low UV environments. How? Because their traditional diet was almost pure vitamin D, whale blubber, seal meat, Arctic char, no grain agriculture, no dietary crash. So the skin didn't change, because it didn't need to. This is Jablonski and Chaplin's central finding from their 2010 paper in PNAS, Skin Color Tracks, UV Availability, but only when food sources can't compensate. The diet variable is the one nobody talks about. Think about what you had for breakfast this morning. Toast, cereal, a croissant. Whatever it was, odds are it was mostly grain. And you probably didn't think to ask, is there any vitamin D in this? You have the same body that was living off seal fat 20,000 years ago. It hasn't caught up. Vitamin D deficiency is now one of the most common nutrient deficiencies in the world. Estimated 1 billion people. 1 billion. We solved the UV problem with buildings and clothes. We never fully solved the diet problem. The body is still running 1.2 million-year-old code in a 2026 environment. Now, let's go back to SLC 24A5 for a moment, because the timeline matters more than you realize. Crawford et al., Science 2017. Ancient DNA from 147 individuals across prehistoric Europe. They tracked exactly when this gene spread. Before 6,000 years ago, rare. After 3,000 years ago, near universal in European populations. 3,000 years. If you want a reference point for 3,000 years ago, that's Troy, Homer, the Trojan War. The world of ancient Greece was a world where pale skin in Europe was only just becoming common. Not done yet. Still spreading. Now, here's the thing about that word, spreading. When geneticists say, a gene spread through a population, they don't always mean people reproduced their way into it. Sometimes it means a population with the gene physically replaced a population without it. The Yamnaya, steppe herders from what is now Ukraine and Russia, migrated massively into Western Europe around 5,000 years ago. They carried SLC 24A5, and they replaced, on some estimates, 40 to 75% of the existing gene pool in Western Europe within a few centuries. So the skin tone shift in Europe wasn't purely selection pressure. It was selection plus migration, the gene arriving on foot, across a continent, an entire genetic landscape, reshaped in centuries. Now stop and think about what that means for the idea of native European appearance. If 75% of the Western European gene pool changed 5,000 years ago, what does native even mean? The honest answer is, it means very little, and we probably shouldn't use it the way we do. Here's another thing the data makes awkward. For most of the 20th century, scientists divided humans into 3, 4, or 5 racial categories. You've seen these categories on forms your whole life: job applications, medical forms, census papers. They were assumed to map onto meaningful genetic clusters. They don't. When you sequence the entire human genome, which we've now done for hundreds of thousands of people, you find that 2 people from the same continent can be more genetically distant from each other than either is from someone on the other side of the planet. The categories we use aren't written in DNA. They're written in history. And history, it turns out, is not the same thing as biology. Which brings us to what your skin is actually doing right now. The shade you looked at when we started. It's doing something right now that it has done every single day of your life. It's measuring UV. Specifically, it's measuring how much UV is hitting it and responding by producing melanin. Melanin absorbs UV. It's a shield. When you tan, that's your body deploying the same shield that was being deployed 1.2 million years ago. Same system. Running in reverse. Your body doesn't know what country you live in. It doesn't know what year it is. It only tracks UV. That's all it has ever tracked. And in a real, biological sense, the thing you're looking at when you look at your skin is a survival score, a record of where your ancestors lived, what they ate, and what killed them, compressed into visible light. Now, let's be very precise about what this doesn't mean. None of this implies hierarchy. None of this implies any trait that correlates with skin color is innate. The science here is spectacularly clear. There is more genetic variation within any skin tone group than between them. We are one species, running on one ancient survival code, in very different environments. That code is still active, in all of us, right now. Here's the final thing that tends to land with a thud when people first hear it. The people most vocal throughout history about skin color as a fundamental category were arguing about a difference that appeared, at the deepest level, only 6,000 years ago. A difference that evolved independently 3 times. A difference driven by vitamin levels and latitude, not by intelligence, not by culture, not by morality, by latitude. And what your great-great-grandmother had for breakfast. That's the whole story. Look at your hand again. You're not looking at identity, not at race, not at origin. You're looking at a 6,000-year-old emergency adaptation, still calibrating, still running the same UV count it ran before any of the wars, borders, or categories were invented. The walls came after. The code came first. I want to ask you one question before you go. If you woke up tomorrow with exactly the skin tone matched to the UV levels where you actually live right now, what would that look like for you? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.